My name is Aris Arugay. I am Associate Professor of Political Science from the University of the Philippines in the Diliman campus. I teach comparative politics, politics of Latin America, and international relations. And I do research on democratization, civil-military relations, populism and extremism in Asia, and foreign policy of the Philippines. President Rodrigo Duterte originally came from the southern part of the country in Mindanao. It's one of the poorest parts of the country, but also one that has not received a lot of support from the national government. Our centralized government does not pay attention very much to the peripheral regions of the country, but he is famous for being a mayor of a city in Mindanao in the south, and he was able to transform it from a very economically backward, unsafe, highly unstable city to one of the most peaceful, orderly, and economically vibrant parts of the Philippines. This allowed him to be attractive to a range of Filipino voters in 2016 during the elections, even if, for example, he was able to get the support of the northern part of the country, including Metro Manila voters. Mm-hmm. Even if he speaks a different language, he has a different set of values from normally middle class or upper class Filipinos. Duterte became an object of fascination because what he wanted is change. Mm-hmm. Change from the business as usual politics in the Philippines, where it's just a game that national elites play. He wanted to be more decisive, for government to be more decisive, and to pay attention to issues that might be considered trivial or less important, like traffic, like security, like processing of government documents, like smoking, and of course his main issue is illegal drugs. Mm-hmm. And that has become the central issue of his government, trying to make the Philippines drug-free. And even if a lot of Western media have depicted him as an authoritarian leader, Duterte enjoys popular support. Mm-hmm. But also there is perception that he is able to make the Philippines less insecure. Mm-hmm. And this is why until now he gets around 70 to 80% trust rating. Yes, so one of the first things that he did was to order a war on drugs. And he did not hide that it will be violent and bloody. During the first few months of his administration, this has become a problem because the number of people who died is very high. It ranged around 7,000 to 10,000. The NGOs who are monitoring human rights violations said it's more than that. Mm-hmm. There are many unreported cases, but the war on drugs somehow made criminals and drug lords fearful of the government. It somehow shocked Philippine society, but the drug war seemed to be only directed towards mainly the poor and the lower middle class. Mm-hmm. And Duterte's government has appreciated the drug war more as a law enforcement problem than a political economy or public health problem. Mm-hmm. We know the damaging effects of crystal meth, which is the main narcotic used by Filipinos, consumed by Filipinos. But Duterte's war on drugs did not really pay attention on how drug dependence can be normalized and integrated back to society. His government has basically judged them as less than human, not worthy of government's help, not worthy of having human rights, and therefore that opinion was diffused to more conservative parts of Filipino society that now believes that he's doing the right thing, cleaning the country, purging the country of what we call the pariah, the people who don't deserve a place in society. So this summary judgment without going through due process, without respecting civil rights, is, I think, one of the major elements of the new right in the Philippines. The Philippines is very known to have a very big and vibrant civil society and social movements. And they are responsible for Philippine democracy's supposed continuity and ability of the NGOs and the social movements to push and advocate for human rights, though we're still a long way to go in terms of social rights, rights of minorities like LGBT plus groups. We have a good performance in terms of gender equality between men and women, but not other sexual minorities. Duterte has become very controversial for his misogynist and sexist personality, and he does not hide some of his very traditional views, but at the same time he seemed to be open to a lot of the advocacies of certain social movements. He said that he's open to an anti-discrimination law that will somehow compel or obligate the state.
But is this a Duterte thing or a Supreme Court initiative?
Well, Duterte's government seemed to be open to it. So the Supreme Court will likely intervene if more conservative groups will challenge a law that the Duterte government will pass. But so far, the Supreme Court, for example, was also responsible for voting against a same-sex marriage case. So some of the lawyers of LGBT activists filed a case saying that given the constitutional provision of equal rights for all, then marriage and civil unions should be extended to not just males and females, but also other sexual preferences and orientations. The Supreme Court struck that down, saying that it's unconstitutional. So what is required then is a law that will ensure that all the rights that are enjoyed by Filipinos are clearly provided for sexual minorities. But the thing with Duterte is that we don't really know whether he'll follow through some of the things that he is saying. And this is still part of his brand of populism as being more performative than ideological. So he might say that he's open to it, but leaders like Duterte sometimes change their minds instantly. Definitely, Philippine civil society has been under attack, and part of Duterte's style is to antagonize and to repress those part of Philippine civil society, and I would say a majority part, who are very critical of his policies, of his style of ruling, of his war on drugs, of his human rights violations, of his misogyny. And those civil society and social movements are branded as communists. They're branded as supporting the drug lords, that if you're fighting for the rights of drug addicts, then you're helping the drug problem more than solving it, right? And somehow the Duterte supporters copy that opinion, right? So Duterte has attacked the Catholic Church, which is one of the most important institutions of civil society, and a lot of their NGOs that are faith-based, Catholic-based, are the ones that are in the communities helping the poor, helping the marginalized. But the dilemma is also the Catholic Church is less progressive than some of the Catholic churches in Latin America, for example. So that makes it very difficult for progressive social movements to get more allies against a government that they think is very conservative and very right-wing. So in a way, Duterte is benefiting from an economic period of growth. But whether or not that growth has become more inclusive, meaning affecting even the poor and the very poor of society, remains to be seen. So the economy is growing, but the government needs to ensure that everyone benefits from the growth, right? So that still is an open question because Duterte has not embarked on major initiatives to redistribute economic wealth. His government has restructured the tax system that has been existing for more than 30 years. It was restructured, but he hasn't given anti-poverty programs, for example. Like we have a similar Bolsa Familia in the Philippines, but it's not as extensive, and it's not grounded on participation, on ensuring that a lot of people are included. So Duterte is still benefiting from policies of previous governments, but they say that once the economy gets negatively affected, people losing jobs, prices are going up, then Duterte's support might be diminished. Right. Well, Duterte represents a phenomenon around the world. So the rise of leaders like Duterte seem to question the mainstream or the dominant configuration of democracy, which is the more liberal, representative, even you would call elite kind. And all of them seem to attack the set of political elites that have built the system, but there are also leaders who are like Bolsonaro, maybe, who is battling a different status quo, right? A status quo. So in the end, like, these leaders seem to tell the people that I am an alternative to a very established political configuration. And I am offering something new, and is using the emotions of resentment and anger that these systems or these governments were able to generate, right? So a lot of them are attacking the version of democracy that has been existing. But to totally say that they're purely undemocratic is also, I think, wrong, because all of them won elections. Some might not get a majority, or like Trump didn't get the popular vote. Like there were still more Americans who voted for Clinton more than Trump. But in the end, the system allows them to be able to capture state power. However, part of the danger that these leaders pose is the way that they're damaging institutions, and the way that they're either replacing them with their own, or simply not building institutions that could maintain some of the positive things that they have implemented. But if they put certain people that might not be qualified, that might not be appropriate, or if they simply undermine institutions, do not use the norms of compromise, accommodation, inclusion, then they have very dangerous effects on democracy, and also they are raising the expectations of people. So they promise a lot of things, that change, a lot of good things will come from their leadership. But we know that politics and governance is very complex, that requires complex solutions, that requires more minds, more thinking, more analysis, more evidence-based policies. And I think the danger is that they keep on saying that I'll solve this list of problems. But if they raise the expectations and they don't meet them, then they'll also generate resentment.
Okay.
They'll also generate a lot of negative emotions. And how can democracy, which they already undermine, keep up or accommodate that new version of resentment from failed promises, from rude awakenings that the expectations were not fulfilled. I think in these times are very dangerous and very challenging for social movements, for NGOs, for activists who have been fighting for a better society, a better democracy, fighting for social,
Journalists.
Right, journalists, those who are part of civil society that are responsible for democratization, that believes that there's that advocating for a deeper democracy is now being questioned, right? I think it's highly challenging for them. But the thing is, they have to maintain their resolve. They should not be co-opted because these governments might just use them to legitimize what they're doing. And then all of a sudden, the only thing that they have, which is credibility and reputation, has already has disappeared, and you can't regain credibility. Once you lose it, you don't have it anymore. You can't have it back. These LGBT movements, women's movements, they need to stay true to their advocacies and principles. Now they might be attacked online, on social media, they might be attacked even physically. But this is the importance of continuous organizing, continuous collective action. They have to call out these leaders every time they have violated rights. They have to stand their ground with the hope that people will notice that they are consistent in their convictions. It's also important to, I think, link these movements that are fighting this extremist populist governments, to link them together transnationally, to share lessons, to share experiences, with the hope of learning from one another. I think it's the time now is, if these leaders are also linking themselves with one another, then the resistance forces and movements should also work together, because they're fighting the same challenge there. And I think finally, I still don't I'm still not disillusioned on young people. I think that their values, maybe not all of them, but most of them, their values are still conducive for a democracy that is inclusive, socially just, and empowering. So the movements also need to include them. The movements must not just be about the older generation, but should also incorporate and make it appealing to the younger generation, who are mostly apathetic to what is going on. So I think that's it. Organizing, linking, standing your ground, linking with other movements in other countries, and finally tapping the power of the youth. I think those are the things that could be done. The environment has been an important issue also in the Philippines. We are very vulnerable to climate change, given that we are an archipelago, and the rising water levels will really affect a lot of our cities because we have a lot of coasts. A lot of the pollution of the marine environment also affects the marine ecosystem in the Philippines. There's a big interest in extractive industries like mining, and this somehow will, a lot of these are in the ancestral domains of indigenous people, something common to the Amazon in Brazil. The problem is a lot of these leaders are also open to more neoliberal economic policies that open up the countries to foreign capital, foreign investments in these types of industries that needs more regulation to protect the environment. All in the name of development, all in the name of economic growth. So the NGOs have been fighting for climate change, and the Philippines as a country is at the forefront of not just climate change, but what is called climate justice. That in the current climate change regime, the poorer countries are not in the same plane as the global north. So I think countries like Brazil and the Philippines, being members of the global south, have more interests that are mutual than with, for example, more industrialized countries or richer countries. But oftentimes it's the NGOs and the environmental social movements that are pushing for issues like rights of indigenous peoples, environmental degradation, and they just need to ensure that the governments under these types of leaders are reminded of that there needs to be a balance between economic growth and expansion of the economy that will benefit their poor constituencies with a sensitivity to the environment, and how in the near future, whatever decisions these leaders will make will have far-reaching impact on the environment, which is important in the survival of the country and of society. Well, I mean, Brazil and the Philippines are like twins separated from birth. They're at the opposite end of the world. They're separated by a huge ocean. They're from different continents, but these are countries that have undergone similar historical experiences from pre-colonial times to contemporary times. And I think despite the distance should not be a challenge for more conversations about what binds the two countries together. The Philippines has learned a lot from the Brazilian democratization experience. We have done a lot of things that you were not able to do, like your continued pursuit of accountability is something that should inspire democratic movements and leaders in the Philippines, because we cannot really move forward without resolving the past, without ensuring that future generations of Filipinos would really know what happened in the dark years of dictatorship. I think Brazil still has that challenge, and of course, while you can offer us lessons, we can also maybe offer you our own perspectives on how to make democracy work. And I think this is a common challenge that both countries will continue to pursue in the coming years.
Thank you.
Thank you.